This session is about configuring web maps for runtime apps. And you see two names over there, Mike Wilburn and Mara Stoika. I'm not Mike, I'm Mara. Mike has the flu. The session started great, you can imagine. Like, Mike has the flu, so he can't be here. And I will do my best to do his part as well as my part of this presentation. So by a show of hands, I'm trying to kind of get an idea of where you guys are. How many of you are runtime developers? Okay. How many of you are developers, what, JavaScript, I guess? Okay, a couple of hands. All right. There is a part of this presentation that is supposed to show you how to publish services from ArcGIS Pro. How many of you want to see that? How many of you are interested in that? Or do you know how to do that already and you don't want to see that? So how many of you want to see that publishing? Okay, so there are several. All right, so we'll go ahead and start with that. I'm just wanting to get an idea if we need to do that or we need to jump, or we can jump ahead. So I will start with that. Now, while Pro is starting up, okay. So this is, you're all familiar with ArcGIS Pro, I assume. So I'm going to go ahead and start a project that I have already set up. Now, one thing that I want to kind of a disclaimer to start with, the data that I'm going to publish in ArcGIS Pro, I'm not actually going to use in the web map. I have separate data, but you'll get the idea. This is just the process of publishing, and then you get the data from the REST endpoint and you use it in the web map. It'll just be a different data set, but the same workflow applies. So I have a map in ArcGIS Pro. I have brought in bicycle parking data that actually came from a shapefile. It's a shapefile from the city of Portland. They have maintained this data of all the location where you can park your bicycles and the different type of bicycle parking. So I want to create a layer, an online layer from this data. What I do is I'm going to go to share. Okay, now we have two options. I have several options, but I'm going to look at these two options here. I can share it as a web map. What does that mean? That means it will be shared, all the data will be shared. The layers, the base map, everything together will be shared. Or I have the option to just share a web layer, in which case the only thing that will be shared is the layer that I'm choosing. So I don't want to create a web map. I'll create the web map later. Right now, I just want to make a web layer. So I click on web layer. And I get the tool that opens that sharing as a web layer. So I'm going to go ahead and call it bicycle parking. And let's just, and I want to set it up as a feature layer. I can specify a folder if I want to. I can select who I want to share it with. And I'm going to hit analyze. It's telling me, it's giving me a couple of warnings telling me that it doesn't have a feature data template. I don't care about that. And I hit publish. So what this does is it's taking my layer and it's publishing it to my ArcGIS Online organizations as a feature layer. Again, this is not a web map. This is a feature layer. Okay. So while this is going on, let's go, and of course the Wi-Fi was down, so I couldn't get to. So I'm going to sign in into my ArcGIS Online organization account. and I'm going to take a look at my content. And there it is. I have my bicycle parking feature layer. Okay. Now, I can take this feature layer and I can use it in any web map that I want. Okay? Now, what I want to do is I want to look at something else. I want to look at a different data set that I have prepared to make a web map from. So I have information about crop data and I have information about farmers markets data that I have in two different feature layers. And I want to create a web map out of those. And that's what I'm going to use throughout the rest of my presentation. So let's make a web map. So I'm going to go ahead and hit map. And I'm presented with a blank web map. First things first, I'm going to set up my base map. I like the dark gray. And now I want to add data to my base map, to my web map. I have the URLs right here. Give me 1 second, let me copy them. So I'm going to add a layer from the web. And that's my crops data. And then I'm going to add another layer and that is my farmers markets data. Okay? And I'm not going to do anything else to it right now. I'm just going to leave it as is. I'm going to hit save as. And I'm going to have to come up with a different name than some of the others I've already created. And I'm saving it. And now I'm going to go ahead and share it so it's available to the entire world. And hit done. Okay. So I have a web map. Now, as you're working with runtime, and as you're building your applications in runtime, and I say runtime, but this really applies to JavaScript also, you have the option to work with web maps or to work with the feature layers directly and create your own maps from those feature layers. The rest of this presentation is about that. It's about what advantages a web map gives you. Okay, so I'm going to go to my application right now, and this is it's a .NET application where I am adding data from feature layers versus from a web map. And I want to show you the difference in the amount of code that you have to write to do one versus the other. Okay? So the first thing I'm going to show you is adding data from feature layers. So what I do is in my map view model, I create a map and I'm creating it with the dark gray canvas. And then I'm adding the layers. Basically what I did in the web map, right, in ArcGIS Online. I'm adding the crops layer. I have to create a feature table from the URI, and then I'm creating a layer from the feature table, and then I'm adding it to the map. Next, I'm adding the markets layer. Again, adding it, making the feature table, adding it to, making a layer out of it, adding it to the map. Okay, now that I have, and ignore the rest of it because that's for later. Now that I have this added, where do I use this map? Well, inside of my XAML, and if you're not familiar with .NET, don't worry about it. XAML is where you set up the UI, the view. In my XAML, I have this map view in which my map is bound to the map that I just set up in the view model. And let me change this real quick because I'm pointing to the map view model, not to the web map view model. Okay. So when I run this application, I will get the same thing that I got in the web map. Right? All right, so I have the farmers markets and I have the crops, which take a little while to show up. Okay? Now, let's think about it this way. If I want to make a change to this data, if I want to say, for example, change the symbology or change which layers are turned on or off, let's just focus on symbology. How hard do you guys think it would be to change the symbology in this code that I have right here? What would I have to do? Quite a lot of stuff, right? I would have to go into every layer. I would have to create a renderer. I would have to say, okay, here are my conditions. This is how I want to render my data, and so forth. Okay? The advantage of using a web map is you don't have to do any of that in code. So, let's take a look real quick at my web map view model. In this view model, I'm doing the exact same thing that you saw me do on the other side, but instead of bringing in the layers manually, all I do is I bring in a URL, and this URL does not actually point to my current web map, so let me change it. There. So if I run this right now, you'll see the exact same thing, right? Because my layers, I haven't done anything to them. But let's go back and to the web map, and let's do something to these layers. Okay, let's change the symbology. First off, I'm going to turn on this crops layer because I don't want to see it right now. I just want to turn it on later if I need to, and save that. And next, I want to look at the farmers markets data. And if I click on these farmers markets and I look at, of course I picked the wrong one. Okay, and I look at the date and time for the schedule, I'm noticing that some of them have a season, right, with different dates and a time or a schedule on the days they run. So I thought, well, a good way to show these farmers markets would be to symbolize them based on when they're running. Are they running on weekdays? Are they running on weekends? Or maybe we don't have any information. So let's do that. I can't really do that just with clicking, right? So I have to write an expression. And how many of you are familiar with arcade? Oh, a few, cool, awesome. So I'm going to write an arcade expression that will do this. Now, what I noticed when I clicked on and identified a feature was that what I got was a 3-letter code, right, for the day. It was TUE for Tuesday, and so the rest of them are all the same. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that to determine whether I'm looking at a weekday or a weekend. And let's do this real quick. And so first thing I want to do is I want to grab that day of the week. So I'm grabbing my feature and that season 1 time, and I'm going to grab the first 3 characters of it. I have to hit return, sorry. Return day of week. I always forget that part. Okay, so now my map is symbolized based on just the days of the week because that's what I asked it to do. But that's not really what I want to do. So let's go back and keep editing it. What I want to do is I want to set up an array with all the different possibilities that I have. And then I want to loop. Let me copy this real quick and then I'll talk to you about what it does. There. So I have this array of days. What I want to do is I want to loop through it, and if my record has that value, I want to take that value and say, okay, that's it. That's the value I'm looking for. If the value falls in the first 5 values, right, that's the smaller or equal than 4. If the index is the first 5, then it's a weekday. If it's the last 2, it's a weekend. And if I loop through this entire thing and no value is found, then it goes out of the for loop and it returns other. Good so far? Okay. So I'm going to test this real quick, make sure I don't have any issues. And one thing that I did notice when I was looking at the map was that there was a Sunday value that was not uppercase. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to say lower, because I want to take the lowercase of all of these. I don't want it to be case sensitive. So let's test that again. Okay. And it's going to run through, and there we are. So we have weekdays, we have other, and then we have weekends. And so let's click on that, and it should give me, I clicked on a green one. I think, let me hit done first, just, okay, let's try that. Clicked on a green one, and it should be a weekend, Saturday. Yes, it is. Okay. Now, save this map. And let's go back to the code. If I run this, which was the first one that I created, is my map going to look like the one I just made? Not at all. And it would take me quite a while to get it to look like that. But if I run this one, which all I'm doing here is getting the web map and putting it into a map, I'm going to get the exact same map. Let me change the view model to make sure I point to the right one. Web map view model and start. Ta-da! And I don't have that other layer, which I chose to turn off in the web map. It's still here. Let's do this. Let's add a legend. I'm going to pull this legend from the toolkit. Oh, I need a background. So I added a legend from the .NET toolkit, and you can see the layer's still there, the crops, but I'm not seeing it anymore because I turned it off in the web map. Okay. Let me close this. Now, what about, yes? I'm sorry, I cannot hear you. Can I put the legend on the left? Are you asking, can I drag the legend to the other side of the screen if I want? I'm sorry.
So you're picking the items on the filter?
Oh, no. That's a legend. Yeah, so the question was, is it, if I click on the legend, on the items in the legend, does it change the filtering? That specific item does not. That's just a plain legend. It's like a read-only. There are other options. There is a table of contents, which that will allow me to click, change layers on and off. I just use this specific one for showing you the layers. Okay, so now, so that's one way to use the web map. Another very common use is pop-ups. Okay, if I want to go into my application and I want to add an identify functionality, and when you click on the feature, you get pop-up information about it. If I go into my map view model and I want to do that, from just the layers. I can get, and it's not a lot of code. The problem is not getting it, the problem is filtering afterwards, okay? I can get this, from the identify, I can get the geo element, and then I can get the feature, and I can set it into this attributes property. And this attributes property, let's do this and turn the legend off, or it's going to be way too busy, is bound to this items control, which is basically a list. So if I run this, you will see that I'm getting a list of all of the attributes for the feature that I'm clicking on. We're back to this ugly map, but so there you go. You have everything, and I didn't put a scroller on it, but the list is kind of this big, you know. But I'm getting all this information I don't care about. I don't care if they sell coffee or beans or, you know, I care what? I want to know about a farmer's market what? The name, the address, the hours, stuff like that. If I wanted to do that in my application, I would have to do something along these lines. I would have to get, and I'm not going to run this because we're running a bit low on time, but I would have to get the element, I would have to set up an array of the attributes that I actually want to show, and then I would have to run through that, loop through that, get those attributes and show those. And when the attributes change, when the user comes and says, hey, I would also like to see this or that, I'll have to go back into my application, change that, recompile it, and so forth. Or I could just create a pop-up in the web map. So notice how I get all that information also here. But what if I just say, configure pop-up, and I can go to the attributes, and I can say I want the market name, let's say I want the website, street, city, oh, and I also want to know when it's open. Hit OK, and now when I click on it, that's all I get, okay? How hard is that to do in the runtime app using the web map? Well, I set up a pop-up manager for my pop-up that was returned from my identify, and I set the pop-up manager for that pop-up, and that's it. And in my view, let me get rid of this. In my view, all I have to do is bind to that pop-up manager and to the display fields. Make sure I still have the web map. And then when I run it, now I have the pretty map, and there's my pop-up. It's not pretty, right? I didn't mean to, this was just to show you how to do it. It's not, of course I can change it, I can add a background to it, margins, etc., etc. This is not a UI class. So that's kind of all I had. Any questions? Okay, so the question was, is it possible to use arcade expressions to render symbology for different zoom levels? Yes. Yes. I would, if you want to know exactly the details, I would go and talk to the arcade team. They can help you out with setting up the script if it's complicated. I know I've done something similar myself. Any other questions? All right. Thank you so much.